Welcome to the 4 Pillars of Men's Health, a podcast of resources for restoring vigor and vitality, bringing you top influencers in the men's health arena, case studies of men who have succeeded and how they did it, and cutting-edge teaching on men's health issues from America's leading men's health guru, Dave Skattum. Get ready to take steps towards good health. Here's your host, Dave Skattum.
Hey, welcome to the 4 Pillars of Men's Health. I am so excited about this series of podcasts that I'm doing, where I'm finding people that I know and just interviewing them about their story and how health has happened in their life, the ups, the downs, and it's just so fascinating to hear from all types of different guys who've lived life and done a lot of things well and some things not so well. And I'm particularly excited to have on my show today a guy that I met quite a few years ago through a program called Toastmasters I'm involved with. His name is Dave Fatemi. And Dave, I'm so glad to have you on my podcast. Thanks for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me, Dave. It's really great to be here.
I'm really looking forward to some of the insights that Dave has for us. He's an intriguing guy. The way I met him, he's a California guy, but he was up in Montana doing an internship at Montana State University, and he started attending our Toastmasters club and got to know him there. But he has a doctorate in clinical psychology and from the Wright Institute. He's a born and raised in San Jose, lived most of his life in the Bay Area. I asked him to give me a little bit of information about his past, and he said his mom is Midwestern and his dad is Middle Eastern. So his dad's from Iran and his mom's from the Midwest. So I'm just a combination of all of that. I'm just really looking forward to your insights on health. And Dave loves to travel. He's been in South America and all over the United States, and I'm looking forward to that. Dave has a younger brother. He likes to learn new things, and he's studied Spanish quite a bit, and he's also learning a language called Farsi, which is a language from Iran, and he looks forward to going and visiting some of the roots of civilization in Iran at some point in his life as well. So, Hey, Dave, the way I'd like to start the podcast off is just to get a feel for who you are and what you're up to these days. I always like to start off with, what's on the front burner with Dave Fatemi these days? What's getting you out of bed in the morning?
Yeah, that's a great question. Great way to start this program. And again, thank you, Dave, for having me. I really appreciate this invitation and then just the work you're doing in general to support men's health.
Yeah.
I think what's on my front burner is I just turned 39 years old, and I'm looking in the back across what feels like the first half of my life. Hopefully there's a little bit more to go before I go halfway.
Yeah.
I'm looking at my achievements and the setbacks and what went well, what didn't go well. One of the things that stands out is a lot of the things that went well were the things that I practiced, the things that I put regular time into, not just, in early in high school, we learned how to cram at the last minute for an exam and just stay up all night counting. Sometimes that worked. Sometimes you still got an A, but a lot of times it was better and less stressful if you could just set aside 15 minutes each day for 1 week leading up to that test.
Yeah.
And that takes so much discipline, but I'm realizing that when I look back at the places in my life where I've done really well, I feel really satisfied or accomplished, it's those places where I just set aside a little bit of time, like even just a minute a day can really, really add up.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I'll give you an example. I've I think it was in senior year of high school, I took my first yoga class. I thought it really helped me with just flexibility and relaxation.
Yeah.
And, as a guy, I was really into some of the acrobatic stuff, like we'd learn how to do handstands. And you could do handstands against the wall. You could do them using your head or your elbows. And it was never my goal to be an acrobat, but I just thought it was great to do a handstand every morning because, the yoga teacher said you're getting blood flow into your brain. Oxygenated blood wakes you up. It helps you focus. And so I just did that every morning as a way of waking up. Instead of having to drink coffee, I would do my handstand and kind of.
That's great.
But initially I'd have to do it leaning against the wall, or I'd have to use my elbows, or I'd have to something to prop me up. And it was never my main goal was just to get the blood flowing to my brain. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been doing that every morning now for about 20 years as part of my morning stretch routine. And now I can jump into the handstand and do, I don't know what you call them, pull-ups, air pull-ups.
Yeah. Wow.
Wall balancing.
Yeah. That's
pushing
awesome.
up and down and working my bicep muscles without falling over. I mean, sometimes I still fall over. But
wow. Without being braced against a wall, you can do it like in mid-air, just like push-ups off the ground?
I'll jump into it and I'll do push-ups, and I haven't gotten to the point where I can dip all the way down and touch my head and then pump all the way. But I can do these little, I would say 2-inch pumps up and down. And I never thought I'd ever be able to do something like that.
Yeah. Wow.
But what it tells me is I proved to myself this kind of rule is that for most things in life, if you practice them a lot, and this is not a lot of practice. This is 20 or 30 seconds a day. But I've been doing it now every day for 20 years, and I feel like, wow, look at what I've accomplished without even really trying.
Yeah.
And so my goal now really is to what else do I want to be good? Well, I want to take up painting. I want to be good at art. I want to be good at giving speeches. I want to be a better dancer. I want to be better at languages. Well, what if I just did that the same with those other things, just 2 minutes a day of those, and see where that adds up after 20 years,
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah, just little baby steps. That's really what it is. It's how you learn things. That's pretty incredible.
Right.
That's neat.
Yeah, I think there was Malcolm Gladwell. One more thing, Malcolm Gladwell put in that book about, I forgot which book, but something about the Beatles became the Beatles after, I think it was 10,000 hours of musical jamming out together.
Yeah, yeah.
But he talks about
10,000
hours being some magical number.
Yeah. They didn't all of a sudden just appear on the stage like some people think. Nobody sees all the hard work that they did for years behind the scenes. So that's pretty cool. Right. So when I think of men's health, I'm like this kind of a amateur history buff. I love history, and one of the things that I think of that kind of naturally goes into my head when I think of men's health is I go back to the Greek and Roman era, and I picture in my mind one of these great sculpturists, and starting off this big chunk of marble, and he's got his hammer and his chisel out there, and he's chisel. And finally, at some point, all of a sudden, just this thing comes to fruition that is his picture of an ideal, healthy man. And so it's, sitting up
David,
there on
like David.
Yes. And so if Dave Fatemi could, put up on a pedestal his idea of a perfectly healthy man, what would that look like to you? Describe that to us.
Perfectly healthy man. You're bringing up David, and David's a special name, and he's it's not, most people know that it was David who defeated Goliath. How do you stand up to a giant and defeat him? How do you? I think courage is so essential to what it means to be a healthy man, and to be ready to be scared, not to be like this, fearless guy. I have no fear. That kind of works for some people, but really, I think a healthy man is someone who has a lot of fear and is constantly stepping into that fire. And after he gets good at something, he doesn't rest on his laurels. He takes on a new challenge and gets scared again and faces the next challenge over and over and over.
Oh, that's good, Dave. When you said that, the thought that came into my head is sometimes in life you get, I have this image of, putting my hand on a stove, and you pull back and you get burnt, and boy, I'm never going to do that again. But in life, sometimes you do get burnt, and if you think to yourself, I'll never even get near that again, that's a really bad thing, and you lose the courage to move forward. That can be a real drawback for us, can't it?
Yeah. You bring up a good point. It's and there's situations where we don't want to have to keep feeling the fear. Sometimes we try it enough times to realize maybe it's not safe or the right goal for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think another way to is to have some discernment, and that's where I think reciting the Serenity Prayer is something that makes us great men, knowing what we can do and knowing what we can't do, and having the wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah.
And having the courage to keep trying at the things that we think we probably can eventually achieve. And if that's our goal and it seems feasible and it seems healthy for us and our families and our community to pursue that goal, then that's the kind of thing where I want people to keep stepping into the fire over and over.
Yeah, yep, that's good. So you just mentioned that your idea of this healthy man is someone who has courage, and even though there is fearful things that happen to us in situations, that we keep moving forward, even in spite of the fear, and we keep moving ahead and having discernment, and being a place where we're in having the wisdom to know the difference between whether or not to take action. What if you look around in your sphere of influence and maybe in your study and research, what do you think it is mostly, or some of the things that make us unhealthy men? What is it that creates unhealth in us? If courage and discernment and wisdom create health, what is it that you see around you and in your study that creates unhealth in men?
Well, as a therapist, someone who's aspiring to get licensed and eventually become a psychologist, a mental health person, I got to give a plug-in for feelings. I know some people feel like that's all we talk about, but as therapists, we got to ask the question, how did that make you feel?
Yeah, sure.
And I think a lot of men are afraid to feel what they're feeling because they're afraid that it makes them weak. But really, I think it takes a lot of courage sometimes to feel whatever you're feeling.
Wow.
And I think I notice a lot of men that I work with, a lot of times they don't have a lot of people to talk about what they're feeling with, whether that's joy, whether that's fear or excitement or hope or shame, whatever that is, except for their romantic partner, who's usually their wife. And that the women are given that permission it's more accepted for women to talk about their feelings. And men, we don't often get that permission, so we put all that energy into our wife or our girlfriend. And when that relationship ends, it is so much more brutal. It's so much more difficult, I've seen, for men to move on from a breakup than it is for women. Because women can, fall back on their girlfriends and their other relationships. And so what I tell a lot of men is, hey, I know this is scary. I know, you just had this loss, someone died, or you just had this breakup, your girlfriend left you. And, but what is it like to just sit with this pain, this fear of abandonment, this fear of loneliness? And it, it doesn't make you weak to acknowledge that. It takes strength and courage to just stay with this, whatever it is you're feeling right now.
Yeah.
And I do think there's times where it's appropriate to kind of just to white knuckle and go through something really challenging. But most of the time, I think it's okay, like I said, to feel the fear, to feel the vulnerability or the shame or whatever it is. And I think if more men can have relationships with other men where they feel safe doing that, because they don't put all their eggs in one basket with their wife or girlfriend.
Right. This is so curious to me. When I've interviewed, I think close to like 25 guys with kind of talking about these same topics, and several times this has become like a theme. This feelings and emotions and guys like aversion or whatever it is. Let's dive into that a little bit deeper and as a psychologist, I'm really curious about what you're going to say here about why is it that men, what is going on there with the emotions? Is it something that we are afraid of? Is it something that's like or like against our culture? Is it something that we're raised with? What is it that, I mean, you just mentioned how critical it is for us to, go into that feeling area. What is it that's stopping us? What's happening there with guys?
I think you sort of named a lot of it. It's different factors. I think a lot of it is kind of the social programming that we've been raised in. And I don't know exactly how it all started, but you can read old historical texts of, Abraham Lincoln and his writings to his guy friends, and there's so much emotion and nuance there. But something's happened, and I think maybe our technology culture, but a lot of it is, I know it's not the most popular word, but patriarchy, where men often feel like they have to always be in charge. And if they show any vulnerability or weakness, they're afraid that people won't respect them, that they won't have control, they won't have power. And I think that's something that is sort of being chipped away at right now. I think there's the myth that to be courageous and to achieve things in life, you shouldn't be vulnerable. And there's images of successful men in our society who do go about life that way. But I think there's images of more successful men who are healthy, who say, hey, you know what? I'm feared. I'm scared to death most of the time, but I'm still doing these things. And just because I'm feeling that doesn't mean that I'm not going to achieve. I'm not going to, And the other thing is, relationships are not prioritized. Feelings are what connect us to other people. It's like the glue between people.
Yeah.
Feelings they're molecules in our brain. They're neuropeptides in our body. They're fluid. They move around, and when we don't acknowledge them, they get stuck. They get frozen.
Yeah.
The best example or worst example of emotions getting frozen is with trauma. You have something that scares you so much, and the feelings are like suppressed. And oftentimes when I talk to my clients who have a lot of trauma, they say they feel numb. It's like they don't feel anything in life. They don't feel connected to people. They don't feel alive in themselves. It's like the juice, the battery is drained. And if you could get them to process the trauma and go and feel some of those repressed feelings, whatever it is, they start to say, wow, I feel alive again.
Yeah. Wow.
Because feelings are, it's more of an inner thing, but it's an inner thing that connects us to the outer world.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm so, thank you for saying that. When I was growing up, one of my favorite, like when I was real little, one of my favorite shows was, and this is kind of going to date me a little bit, but it was called The Lone Ranger. And, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's this cowboy guy, and he had his sidekick Tonto, like a Native American guy, and they were out, fighting for justice and making things right. And that guy, he did everything himself, and he never showed emotion towards anything that I remember. So here this guy is the guy when I was like in very formative age, for me, like 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, watching the Lone Ranger going out and conquering the world, and and everything worked out for him, and so
this
so I'm
image
just
of
wondering.
Healthy masculinity, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's what I was thinking, reflecting on when you were describing guys in our culture, in our world. So that's really good. I really appreciate you saying that. And you mentioned that feelings connect us to other people. Now,
yes.
Describe that a little bit more. What do you mean by that? Feelings connect us to other people.
Yeah. Gosh, I don't even have the words offhand but I'm just going to let go and see where my mind tries to.
Sure.
How I can articulate that. It's feelings are like glue. When you said something that just now you asked me that question. How are feelings connected to other people? Like I might have a set of thoughts, but I'm also like feeling, like excited, and I'm feeling stimulated. I'm feeling joy and this presence right now. And these are all feelings that keep me in this conversation, that motivate me to stay in this conversation. Yeah. Even anger typically pushes us away from people, but even anger can draw us towards people. It can motivate us to tell someone, hey, I'm going to set this boundary with you. Certainly love is an emotion that absolutely connects us to other people. It's when we're not feeling, it's like, we can have an intellectual conversation and just have thoughts and ideas, but that's really not enough to have a conversation. People want to feel passion about the ideas they're speaking about. They want to feel motivation and connection. And I think without the emotion piece, ideas become dry and stale. Yeah. So it's not just about being intellectual. Intellectual is a great thing to be too, and I think that's an area where men often strive. But the emotion piece is essential to connecting and communicating these ideas that we have.
Yeah. Yep. Man, so I want to turn the corner and get a little more personal with you. But one thing that you mentioned that I think it'd be cool to spend a whole podcast show on is you mentioned just kind of briefly. You just mentioned how trauma impacts feelings and our connection and fear and all that stuff. And I think we could. That's like a Pandora's box, but. I would love to sit down with you sometime and just explore that a little bit more. But I want to turn the corner a little bit here and get a little bit more personal about you specifically and your journey to health. And what if you look back over your life, what are some of the things that you see or that you can see in your past that have either like pivotal times in your life that maybe have created a healthy stream in your life or an unhealthy stream? What can you think back over your life and think, of a circumstance or maybe where a person came into your life or a situation happened to you that one day you were going one way or the next day you went the other way, and it either created vastly more positive health in your life or vastly more negative? But can you think of times like that in your life?
Absolutely. I can think of, I talked about wanting to take up painting and art. I think it was back 20 years ago now, 2000, and I was drawing something. It was this image of this Hindu god, very, very powerful image. And I showed it to my brother, and he just was I think he wasn't trying to be rude or hurtful or jealous, but he was honest, and he said, I don't really like it, and this here, and he's being very critical, and he's being honest, but man, I've never been able to take up the drawing board again when it comes to drawing or painting, not enthusiastically enough. But I showed that painting to other people, and they said, no, that's really good, that's not bad. And but when people discourage me, that sets me back. And I notice a lot of times I'll be in a certain phase of life and someone will say, oh, you're in high school. Well, after high school, you got all these responsibilities. You don't, and then you end up, for me at least, I went on to college and I ended up liking college even more than high school, Or I remember growing up and people just saying, oh, once you get to be an adult, you realize life isn't so fun and there's a lot of stress. But I remember this one time I was out kind of camping with my dad and his friends, and this older guy just looking at me. I think he could tell I was a little bit bored. All the adults there, I was the only kid, and he just looked at me and he said, you know what? Life really does get better as you get older. And I think what I'm trying to get at is, and that really stayed with me. I said, wow, that's maybe the first and only time I ever had an adult tell me that.
That's cool.
It was almost hard to believe because all the other adults in my life were telling me the opposite.
Wow.
You know, you get to have fun and run around now, but the fun is over once you get to be this age, or, you know.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've been told that over and over, but then I have a few counterexamples or voices of people that I can hold on to and say, no, wait, I've enjoyed having kids. It's not all stress and no fun.
Yeah.
Or I've enjoyed retirement. It's opened up all these doors. Yeah. But most people, when they tell me about retirement, they just want to drone on and on about how boring life is, how depressing and lonely you are when you don't have a job to. And I say, you know, I'm thinking maybe that's true for you, but can you try to hold space for the other possibility? You know? Yeah,
that's great. Yeah, isn't that, a couple of things that I'd like to just draw out of that is one is, you mentioned the story with your brother, and there was probably a little bit of trauma there, wasn't there, that impacted you?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to touch that fire again.
The word trauma, in the broad sense of the word, I was like, man, he held me back. Or what he said.
Yeah. Right.
I took it in a way that held me back.
Yeah, and then the other thing that I noticed when you were talking there was that you're mentioning how impactful that one gentleman's words were to you. And I get that time after time on these podcasts how at certain times in our lives, people just kind of like come bouncing along, and it just like in your example there, maybe he was just there for like maybe a day, or maybe he just said like 3 or 4 sentences to you, but the impact of that was dramatic, and now you can say to yourself, you know, life can be good and life can get better as I live longer, and it like alters your whole thought process. Just one person coming in and saying 1 or 2 sentences to us. It's incredible.
Yeah. I don't think he ever realized what an impact he had on me by saying that.
Yeah.
He was just saying it in passing, and he really, really meant it. You could feel it when he said that.
Yeah.
And I wasn't having a bad childhood or a bad life in that moment, but it was, and that's what was also so surprising. Is, wow, he's saying it's even better than this.
Yeah, that's awesome. So here's I got a couple more questions. This one is this is about just you personally. What is your biggest struggle with maintaining good health?
I think going back to what I said at the beginning, I think when I fall behind on maintaining healthy habits or rituals, I think that then I start, it's almost like, you know, the energy slows down and the motivation falls behind. It gets harder to bring it back. Yeah. And, you know, I mean, I work with people as a therapist who are too structured, too scheduled, and I think you see that more in California, where you have these high-tech, you know, really overachieving people. That's not my problem. I'm on the opposite end where I can get sluggish. And so for me, having some agenda, using the calendar more, writing things down, keeping myself accountable to doing those things that I write down, having friends in my life that I can trust will keep me accountable. I can ask them, hey, I want you to put my feet to the fire when this moment comes up. And I want you to ask me, did you do it? What got in the way? And, you know, don't be too easy. I want people who challenge me the way I want to also challenge myself.
That's cool. That's great. Okay, here's the second to the last question, but I think it's one of my favorites. Is so Dave Fatemi, I've put a crown on your head, given you a magic wand, and you are like the king of the world. You can make anything happen. You can do anything you want. What top thing would you do with this magic wand to help guys become more healthy? If you could do one thing, what would it be?
Oh yeah, I would just wave that wand and tell them to be as comfortable with your feelings, with whatever you're feeling. Mm-hmm. Having your feelings and feeling them is fine. You're fine the way you are in that moment. Accepting yourself and where you're at in life in that moment is a courageous act. And if that can be, we're never perfect. We're all works in progress. But if all the men in the world can hold on to that as at least as a goal, that I think would transform humanity.
Wow. So I'm going to challenge you a little bit on that. So how, if all the guys in the world did what you said and they got comfortable with their feelings, what would that do for us? How would that make us healthier?
We would have more friends. Most of us would have more friends. We'd have deeper connections with our wives, our partners. We'd be spending more time with our kids and our families. We'd be more engaged in the community. We'd have a more dynamic society that's more artistic, that's more alive, that's more engaged, that's healthier, that is breathing more deeply, that's more embodied, that's more connected to their body, more aware of what they're motivated by and what they're passionate for. We'd have a society where people don't run as fast or as far from their problems. They'd be leaning into, they'd be feeling into their challenges. Because feeling fear doesn't mean running away from the challenge. It means running closer to it.
Yeah.
You know?
That sounds like a pretty great place to be. That sounds pretty good. Hey, so it's really good. So let's wrap this up. I don't know what more. I mean, you said some fantastic things, but let's wrap this whole thing up with this last thing about why don't you, any last thoughts or remarks that you have regarding men's health and men taking steps towards good health, but if you wanted to talk about anything that you're doing, anything that's worked really well for you in your life, if you want people to contact you or whatever, however you kind of want to wrap this up, I'm gonna do it like a forward lateral to you, and you can just run this in for a touchdown. So there you go.
Okay.
Give us some wise words of final wisdom, Dave.
I think for men, we've been conditioned to see ourselves a certain way, to act in the world in a certain way, and some of those healthy models were okay, or they were half good, like the Lone Ranger or the Red Rider. Yeah, they were courageous people, but it doesn't mean there's not more work for us to do as men now, as a culture. We got to take the next step, and I encourage men to keep trying new things and to lean into challenge, whether that's challenges that are outside of them in their jobs, in their families, in their relationships, or inside of them, and that's just whatever they're feeling in that moment, and investigating the inner and the outer worlds, bringing the inner. That's what I'm trying to encourage men to do. Go on out there in the world, but also go on in there in yourself and investigating, and also having, atheism it works for a lot of people, but if you're open and if you have a spiritual or religious tradition to using that too, because that helps us lean into our feelings and to feel challenged and to grow. And so I want to see more men having more variety in their lives. I want to see more men trying new things. Some things may not be for them, they may not work out, but at least they tried and they didn't feel like, it was wasted time, that there's always something over the horizon. And that's something even the traditional John Wayne cowboy can agree with, that there's always something over the horizon that we can ride off into.
You You've been listening to The 4 Pillars of Men's Health with Dave Skattum. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit the4pillarsofmenshealth.com.